Howdy, Crystal Conclave. It's NESHY, and today we're going to be doing a coaching session with Ryan Levine from Duelist Academy. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. Yo, what's up, Ryan? How's it going?
Doing pretty well. Been pretty busy with outside Yu-Gi-Oh stuff for, a while, obviously. So I've had a lot of coaching sessions in a row. You're my third one today, actually. So.
Oh, perfect. Just knocking them
great.
all out, huh?
Yeah, actually, yes. Yeah, so I
Pretty
know you mentioned
day.
you wanted to go over deck size and starters. I don't know if you have any other specific topics you wanted to go over, but we can just start there. Actually, that's a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, I'd love to mostly just go over that. And, obviously with the new Shield Bear coming out in July, it's pretty cool just being Crystal Beast support, it's Sapphire Pegasus Searcher. And, it's not really Noble Knight support. I don't think anyone's going to really play it in Noble Knight. So it really just gets interesting playing a lot of Sapphire Pegasus in one deck.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just share my screen for right now. I kind of have an example deck list that I want to show to kind of talk about that topic.
Okay.
This is not something that I have I have not refined this yet, but it's just something that's it's an emerging card. It's not, I'm not gonna anyway. So I've played this, a variation, I think, on this Zephyr deck.
Raptor? Zephyr tier, right?
Yeah. Yes. So I've played this Zephyr deck at one of the extravaganzas a little while ago. God, it must have been like 4 of them ago at this point now. And obviously it was very different from this, but it used a lot of the same principles. It was kind of like, I made it to be kind of like a rank 4 deck, not like the Calamity deck. Obviously, I'm not going to have a 57 card deck by the time this is done, but playing a deck over 40 is something that was like really frowned upon in Yu-Gi-Oh for the longest time. And in fact, I think you've probably seen, a lot of people say, like you have to play 40 cards with Upstart in every single deck. And I'm going to say for 99% of situations that is true. I think in most of the time, you want to play as few cards as possible.
Right.
Because, it's just simple math. It lets you see your strongest cards more often, right?
You can open Exodia
when the game
more often.
was... Yes. I mean, it's more so when the game was based around unsearchable one-ofs. Like, if you look at this deck here, not a single card in my main deck is limited or semi-limited. Every single card in my main deck I could legally play at 3 copies. I don't play all of them at 3 copies because they're searchable, and I'll get into that. But, back in the day, from 2005, when GOAT was the most, was really popular, that was kind of like... That was like the renaissance of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Was, I think, when GOAT format happened, and there was a whole series of bans of the most unfair cards, and we no longer had literal Chaos Emperor, Dragon, and Magical Scientist decks.
Right.
Up until, I'm even going to go as far, up until like maybe even 2014, 2013 maybe. The game was really, really heavily based around these super powerful, unsearchable one-of cards. Not entirely based around, but it was like, if you drew Heavy Storm, that was a huge advantage, right? If you drew Dark Hole, that was a huge advantage. If you drew Monster Reborn, that was a huge advantage. Yeah, there were a ton of these super powerful limited cards that were unsearchable, and there was nothing else like them, right? There was nothing else that could take their space. So to maximize your win rate, you played the lowest number of cards possible in your deck, and you would try to draw these cards faster than your opponent. Not to say that if you draw Heavy Storm and your opponent doesn't, you automatically win.
Right.
Obviously, there's a lot more going on into that.
It's just a very high quality
card. These cards were super powerful. Yes. And now, how Yu-Gi-Oh! Kind of is now, and it's like some of these decks, like this one, for example, is, I'm not going to say it's like, this is not a traditional combo deck. Like, I'm not like comboing off and doing some crazy thing. I mean, like, I kind of am, but I'm not really gonna get into the specifics of the combo of this deck. This is a very much a work in progress. I kind of want to use this to explain playing redundant cards and cards that have similar purposes and how deck size interacts with that. So,
I mean, I see Calamity in the extra deck. I can already tell it's a banger of a Zephyr deck.
Yeah.
The Calamity that didn't get banned.
Kind of Gamma. And they banned the wrong Calamity, of course. How this deck works, right, is it's not 60 cards. I mean, it's not 40 cards. It's probably going to end up being 60 or maybe 50 when I cut some things out. But the reason for that is I'm going to go over all the cards you don't want to draw. And by don't want to draw, I mean they are pretty actively detrimental if you draw them.
But they're not hard Garnets, right? Like, those are all Takatomborgs.
Yeah. They're not like... I don't think this deck really has any Garnets. I don't think this deck has any cards that if you draw it, you can't function. I generally stay away from decks and cards that have those requirements, and I think Konami has thankfully kind of strayed away from that kind of design. I guess for the distinction, as you mentioned, like a Garnet, which I think a lot of people use this term incorrectly. Ciphering Driver is not a Garnet. Garnet is a card that if you draw Garnet, you cannot legally activate Brilliant Fusion. It is the absolute worst type of card. Driver is more akin to Takatomborg, where if you draw Terratop and you draw Takatomborg, yeah, it sucks. You can't search Takatomborg, so you don't get a free card, but you still play the card. You still make a rank 3, right? Which is a very important distinction. If you draw these, you can still play the rest of your cards. You're just losing a free card, right?
One thing
there's nothing
in
this deck. I don't think.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's nothing in this deck that I think if you draw, like, you can't play. Even the Scrap Raptor, if you draw Chimera, I mean, if you banish both off Desires, then obviously, but whatever, I'll get into that later. But even if you draw Chimera, like, you could play one Chimera in this deck. I was playing one for a while. There's a reason I ended up playing 2. I'm not playing 2 because I'm afraid of drawing it. I'm playing 2 because I actually want to resolve Scrap Raptor twice. That is why I'm playing 2, because I'm playing 9 copies of Scrap Raptor. So I'll get into that a little later. But
I just want to say
there's
real
no card
quick
in this deck that is just like you can't draw.
It's just funny how you said that modern cards these days, like Halka Fibrax, Simorg, like they can summon from hand, they have the option, even Elpie, but then Scrap Wyvern for some reason can only summon from deck. I don't know why it doesn't have the option to summon from hand.
I'm not playing the Scrap Golem in this deck. I might later if I determine that it's necessary. I'm actually not even playing Scrap Wyvern as part of my going first combo. I'm actually playing Scrap Wyvern because the effect to destroy a card on the field is not your field. So going second, this card actually just is an efficient Link 2 monster that lets you, make a, like, Scrap Wyvern pops an opponent's card, brings back a guy, then you can make a unicorn and go from there, and it's like, it's fine. I haven't played this deck. This is not a refined deck, obviously. This is just me, like, I spent a lot of time on the Zephyr deck before. I mean, I don't know if you saw the stream that we did, but I had a whole hour-long stream going over why I thought Zephyr was super cool and like a fun rogue deck. It's different now. Dweller is not as good as it was. Like, we're in a much wider metagame where I think this deck was really cool against specifically Drytron and Virtual World, where Dweller was like really, really good. I actually played like 2 Dwellers in that deck. Because you would make a Dweller, they would spend their turn killing it, and they couldn't kill you. And then you make a second Dweller.
Crazy.
and that was my stupid deck. So this is a little different, but
no, my favorite part from that stream was when we were making a tier list after the ban list, and then obviously you put Zephyr tier, and then you started playing against Jesse, and then at one point it was just, Jesse, please just let me win with my Zephyr deck.
Yeah, it was not great. This is a tool that I want to use. Let me see if I can full screen this. Uh-oh, I've done that really poorly. Okay, so this is a tool. I've done it again. All right. This is like a super old thing. It's called Deck Builder's Toolkit. This is just it's a calculator with a really fancy user interface that makes it easier for dumb people like me to understand.
Perfect.
So basically, just for some examples, for example, you want to talk about starters, right? Let's label this card like starter like A. This is going to be like Sapphire Pegasus, right? For your example. So let's just do like Pegasus, and then every other card is pretty much not Pegasus as far as we'll like just for what we're concerned with, right? So we now have the 2 categories. We have the Pegasus and not Pegasus. So you have 3 Pegasus, 3 Crystal Bond, 3 Rainbow Path, and then now 3 of the Noble Knight guy. So that's 9 or 12. And then you can Rhoda for the Noble Knight guy, right?
Yeah, Rhoda, and then
you can play Chalice. So you could, in theory, play 16.
But also,
is that right?
Yeah, 16 in total. But then minus the 3 Pegasus makes it 13.
Yeah.
But then
so we have
the Noble Knight guy is like technically more valuable because you could also search Dinotherium if you already have the Pegasus, but but I guess you could say that about Bond, and then Bridge could also just search for Promise instead, so never mind.
I mean, it's fine. I just think like for the basic premise of just like you want Pegasus in your hand. So you have 16 of a card, right? This basically how I set this up. There's actually a really good explanation of how it works here. So if anybody watching this just wants to pause the video and read how this works, you know, I'm not going to explain it all because it's just on the screen. Well, I guess so basically how I've set this up, it will tell me the odds of drawing at least one Pegasus. So at least one. Not, you know, if I want to do specifically one, then I have to change it. But this is the odds of seeing at least one Pegasus is 93.54%. In a 40 card deck when you're playing 16 of your cards being Pegasus. However, the issue with this is as you increase the number of starters, you also increase the redundancy, right? Where now the odds of drawing two are pretty high, right? Like let's see, the odds of drawing at least two is almost 70%, right? To draw at least two of them. And if you have two Pegasus, I mean, like Bond's a little different, and as you mentioned, the Noble Knight's a little bit different because it can search a different card, but for the most part,
it's still relatively diminishing returns.
Yeah. And the card it searches is going to be worse than the Pegasus. So the card is losing value when you draw multiples of them, right? And not even stopping there at you know, like two. There's a 30% chance. There's a 30% chance of drawing at least three, and then there's a 7% chance of drawing, and there's even like that's for drawing 5 of the same card. That is an insanely high number. I know that 0.66 doesn't look that high, but like, okay, it lost my template. All right, but like, but for something like that, of your entire hand being the same card, that is a ridiculously high number. Because usually you only have, you know, like 6 of these in your. Usually you have like a 3 of and like 3 rotas, and the odds of you drawing 5 of them are so ridiculously low. It doesn't even register at the number of digits this program can calculate, and it will literally say 0.00 or it will say 0.01 because it is so ridiculously low.
Right.
So
like 1 in every 200 duels, you'll have a hand of just 5 Pegasus.
Pretty much, actually, a little more than that.
What a world
slightly
we live in.
More frequently, yeah.
Right.
But so how this will change is like there are different like bars for consistency, right? There are like different levels that I kind of evaluate this, and this kind of goes back to like, I'm sure you've heard this, and I'm sure a number of people watching have heard about the, you know, like a normal summon number, or you know, like how many normal summons you want in your deck, and some people
like
say 5, some people say 6, and it's not really a hard number. It depends on the potency of the normal summon and what your deck can do without it. For something like Invoked, you need to play as many Alistairs as are legal, because if you do not summon Alistair, your deck literally does nothing, right? Like I mean, that's not entirely true with like Dogmas, like you. But let's be real: if you're not summoning Alistair during your turn in your invoked deck, your turn is pathetic.
Yeah,
right.
We'll say
you're summoning Ecclesia, you're searching a floor, and you're setting a back row, and you're sad, right? Like you are playing the maximum number of Alistairs you can legally play. Within reason. Like, I'm sure if they printed, you know, like 5 more Magical Meltdowns, I guess you would draw the line somewhere, right? Like, you wouldn't play 18 Alistairs.
Right.
Because, as we just saw, with that, with 16 in your 40 card deck, the odds of drawing 2 or 3 is so ridiculously high, half your hands will just be bricks because you'll draw 3 Pegasus, you know, or more. I think it said like 30% of the time you're drawing at least 3. And the odds of you actually doing anything meaningful when your hand is just all the same card is very low. So you want to find the number somewhere like in a 40 card deck. It also changes if you're going first and you're going second. Right. So a lot of people will cite numbers that took into account the old way where you drew 6 cards going first. I know some of you watching probably haven't even played Yu-Gi-Oh! When you drew 6 cards going first, because that changed literally 7 years ago, which is crazy to think about.
Has it really been 7 years?
It's literally been 7 years. It was like July 2014 or something when it changed.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Or maybe it was like August 2014, but whatever it was, it was something like that. It's like so obviously the math changes when you only draw 5 instead of 6. Your deck needs to be more consistent because you're seeing less cards. And actually, to look at that, just to demonstrate, I'll just show like the math behind drawing 1 of a 6 of in a 5 card hand. You have a 57% chance of doing it, and then if you have a 6 card hand, you have a 65% chance of doing it. So, like, that's pretty significant over the course of it. It means, like, over the course of 100 games, you'll see it 8 more times, right?
Yeah.
That's super relevant. And that's also why you can build you can actually side and build your deck a little bit differently for games 2 and 3 if you know you're going second or something like that, because you will have an extra card to work with. But the main issue is figuring out how necessary your normal summon is. In this case, I'm going to refer to this as like normal summon does not necessarily need to refer to a literal monster you can normal summon. Sometimes it can refer to like Red Eye's Fusion, which just says you can't summon when you activate this. So it essentially is your normal summon, right? Like it is what you're spending your summon action on.
Yeah.
Numeron Network is also like that, right? Like
Set
you can't like technically you can normal summon before you Numeron Network, but unless it's a card that tributes, then you can't Numeron Network. So like you're basically giving up your normal summon to use Numeron Network, right? So those types of cards, function in the same way. It is they're your starters, and you would like to see them. And generally speaking, seeing multiples of them is less good because most cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Nowadays are once per turn. If not by the actual card text, just by the limitation of the normal summon or something like that, right? So, so this example, we have 6 Pegasus. Let's start with 6, and then I'll show you the numbers. So as I said, 57.7. This is to draw at least 1. So this is including you. This is the odds of drawing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. The odds of drawing exactly 1 is actually 42%, which is 42.229, whatever. And then as we increase this number, right? Actually, I want to show the odds of drawing 2 of it first. So the odds of drawing 2 or more, which is where we get into it being bad, I guess. Like you would prefer to draw exactly 1 and then have 4 other cards. Is only about 15%, which is like pretty low. That's 1 in every 8 games, roughly, that you'll see 2. That's like an acceptable level of error, right? It's like, okay, 2/3 of the time I'll see a Pegasus, and then 1/8 of the time I'll draw 2 or more. And that's fine, that's acceptable.
Right.
When you get to 7, I have to adjust this number 2. You're going to see at least 1 Pegasus about 64% of the time, and then you're going to see 2 or more 20% of the time. So the odds of seeing 1 or more increased by more than the odds of seeing 2 or more. So we are still getting a higher return on investment for the result we want, as opposed to the result not to say, like, drawing 2 isn't the end of the world, but we don't want to see that number going up more than the first number.
Right.
I think it's around 8 in a 5-card hand is where that flips. So I should have been writing all these down. Like, I have this on a spreadsheet somewhere else.
I think I remember you saying that in the Numeron video.
Yes, in the Numeron video, I go into great detail about this, and I was like very excited. It was just something that I was like really hammering out, and I was like, oh, that seems really relevant. But I believe it's 8 is when it starts to flip. And when you have 8 in a 40-card deck, it's now the odds of drawing 2 or more have increased more than the odds of seeing 1.
Gotcha.
Right. So now
if Terraforming came to 2,
less
then
desired
Invoked
outcome
may or may not play it.
Wait, what?
If Terraforming came to 2, Invoked may or may not play it as the 8th Alistair.
Yeah. That one I think is a little bit more. You probably would, because that one you really, really need to see Alistair. Like, if you don't see Alistair, your deck is like so. And again, other decks, like maybe in Crystal Beast, you need to see this starter so badly that you have to play more than 7. But this is when it stops becoming, when you go from like 6 to 7 to 8. Like around that range is when it stops becoming, in my opinion, like an auto include of like, okay, this is just because this is not a strict boost to consistency anymore, right? Yeah. You are getting your starter more, but you're also potentially bricking on multiple starters more, where your hand is multiple starters, and if it gets stopped, you can't do anything, right? Where your hands might be getting weaker because you're drawing so many cards that do the same thing. So what you can do with this is I'm going to go back to the Zephyr deck for a minute, is there are obviously a lot of cards I don't want to draw. I'm not going to say every single one of these. I'm actually going to, like, the Pendulum Magician cards are actually, like, fine. Like, I don't really... These are just very fine, acceptable scales, especially harmonizing, right? Like I'm okay with drawing these. It's mainly the worst Zephyr utility cards, and then the traps and these cards. So these, like, 8 cards are the ones that I would rather not draw.
Right.
And when I'm... So now, well, let's flip these numbers, right? When I'm playing 8 cards I would rather not draw, I'm going to see one of them 70% of the time, right? So here we are, and it's like, oh man, your deck sucks. Like, you're drawing this card. So now it's like, okay, how do I lower this number? I want to put more cards in my deck. So now I'm playing a 57 card deck, right? And how does that lower? Now I'm drawing one of those, like, 15% less frequently, right? Yeah. Now only one in every, about like one in every half a game. If we're just gonna play, if we are just gonna, play a 60 card deck and whatever, you're gonna draw one about half the time instead of like 70% of the time, and that's a huge difference. And we can get away with playing more of these cards because we have all of these super redundant search cards that all search the same cards, right? So, as we mentioned about Garnets, although this card isn't out yet, Crystal Beasts have their own Garnet, don't they?
Yeah. I actually have a deck list if you want to check it out.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That'd be pretty good to show, like, just the bricks with Zenith and then the Rainbow Dragon, which kind of sucks.
Yep. Sure, yeah. Send that over. I'll have a look. But that's where this principle kind of comes into effect, and that's where I think old Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't have this. In your GOAT format deck or your X-Saber deck, you didn't have these Garnets and Taketomborgs. Really. Like, you didn't really have them. I can't really think... Garnet, like, the fact that we refer to them as Garnets pretty much means, like, we refer to every normal summon that searches as the Stratos because that was one of the first cards that did that. That was other than, like, gadgets. That was pretty much the first card that did that. Right. And it's become such a ubiquitous term that's what we call them. We call them Garnets because Gem Knight Garnet was literally the first one that did that, right? So, oh god, there's a lot going on here. All right, I'll evaluate this in a second, but I want to finish my Garnet tangent.
Yeah.
So, which leads me to believe, like, I'm sure there are some, maybe like in like a GOAT deck, like you only want to draw one Thunder Dragon, and if you draw multiple Thunder Dragons, obviously you're not searching 2, and like that's whatever. But Garnet was pretty much the first card that was like super, super detrimental to draw, right? So here in this deck, the cards that are, I'm actually just gonna save this so I can.
Yeah, go ahead and move around. I just separated it by archetype, pretty much.
Without custom cards, what have I done? All right. Well, I want this just so I can manipulate the deck.
Hit import deck.
Did this work?
Nice. Yeah.
Okay, it does work. Excellent. All right. Sorry. I've never imported a deck with custom cards before, so I wasn't sure what the file name was.
Oh, that's true.
Anyway, so yeah. So as far as the cards that like are. Well, this one I guess, can you Neos Fusion from hand? You can, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this one actually isn't even. It's mainly just these. It's just these two, right?
And even Cobalt Eagle, like you can still summon a Pegasus from deck instead of the Eagle.
Can you not use Crystal Bond? Oh no, this is a Crystal Beast. Okay, just kidding. All right, I don't know. I forgot this literally had Crystal Beast in its name.
I mean, I guess the Cobalt Eagle makes sense if it's a Garnet, because then you can't go into the Simorg Link off of the TriBrigade combo. Yeah. Because you need
if it very actively like makes your play significantly worse, then I'm going to classify it as a Garnet here.
That's fair enough.
It's mainly just these two, right?
Yeah.
I think are the only two. The rest of it you can pretty much just like function. Like the rest are like functional.
Yeah.
And okay, you've got 1 bond 3. That makes sense. Okay, and then I guess I'll go quickly because I think we've talked about a bunch of different principles with these and all the deck doctors that we've done in the past and whatever about how like, you're playing the Rainbow Bridge as your toolbox, and you're only playing 2 in the main deck, which is Crystal Bond and Crystal Promise. But then you're maybe gonna side Crystal Conclave, or maybe you play one or something, right? But this is about like the redundancy of these cards, right? You're cutting down on the once per turn cards. Like Crystal Bond, more or less, is a normal summon, right? Because it searches a card you have to normal summon, being the Pegasus, and if you draw Pegasus and Bond, the Bond, it's actually Pegasus that's doing nothing, not Bond. But like, you know what I mean?
Can add Zenith.
It is like one of your cards is non-functional. Yeah, because it's just super redundant. And then Rainbow Bridge alleviates that, because if you just have Pegasus, then Rainbow Bridge is no longer searching Bond. It's usually just going to search Promise, and then that can actually, now this is a functional card, right? This is no longer just a redundant card, and that's where the math that we just did can stray a little bit, because, and then as you mentioned, the Shield Bearer can search Dinotherium instead of Pegasus, so it can also be somewhat functional. So it's not, and that's also why I said at the beginning, this is not an exact like number. I don't even know if you can do strict calculation to determine these, because the utility of these cards are so subjective, right? It's like, I'm not even sure how you would mathematically show that Rainbow Bridge is better than Crystal Bond in terms of bricking. I think actually just like the most efficient way to calculate it would just be simulation. Which people have done. And actually, just to plug the Patreon, Asala has a cool video about the simulator. I think I feel bad for not remembering his name, but it's on the video, and he's in the video with Asala. But whoever won the LCS with the FTK deck, the Dragon FTK deck a little while ago, he developed a simulator with his circle. A year ago. Yes, it was a year ago, I believe, and he helped them. That's crazy to think about as well. And he helped them, and they made it a simulator to determine the consistency of the FTK, where it's a lot harder to mathematically figure out how good Rainbow Bridge is, with like the actual hard numbers. It's pretty easy to just put it in a literal simulation and just say, okay, do 100,000 simulations. And then you define the criterias of bricking, and when you're creating that simulation, you can just determine Rainbow Bridge is better than Crystal Bond and whatever, right? And you can figure out these parameters. Easy is not the right word, but significantly easier to just jam a list with criteria into 100,000 simulations and give you a good enough, answer. So for those specifics, I would say you just have to do simulations. The math behind it is pretty close to impossible, and anybody that can do that math accurately shouldn't be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! They should be literally solving the world's problems. So if you're watching this and you can help me with this math problem, please go do something else. Please. don't help me figure out if Rainbow Bridge is better than Crystal Bond. I think we can cover that. I think that we can handle it. But so by playing a larger deck, as we just talked about, you're playing 52 in this deck, right? Let's look at the Garnets.
I also don't know about the deck size. I would like to maybe increase or decrease it. Obviously, if we're going to increase it, we'd play more Heritage of the Chalice, like more Rainbow, more Crystal Bond, maybe that kind of thing.
Exactly.
But
and that's exactly it. Is that's what these redundant search cards allow you to do? Is they allow you to increase your deck size with less of a hit to consistency, and then you can avoid drawing your unplayable cards. So, for example, it's 18% to draw one of the two cards, right? When you play, so if you just played a 40 card deck, it would be 23% or about 23.7%. By increasing the deck size, if we went all the way to 60, right, it would decrease that chance to about 16%. So, all in all, again, like, those numbers don't seem super crazy. Like 23%, and 16% aren't crazy high numbers. But when you're going from like when you really think about it, you're going from like about a little less than 1 in every 4 games to a little more than 1 in every 8 games. Is that right? That's about right. Yeah. Something like that. I guess 15 is not 1 in 8. That's like 12. So 15 is like 1 in 7, kind of close enough. You know, you're and the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh is played in a 2 out of 3 match setting, that's also relevant, and that's also like something that I usually keep in mind when doing these numbers. Again, we're humans, we're not perfectly shuffling. It's going to be a little different, but I generally, when deck building, try to hit numbers that hit those thresholds.
Okay.
And because otherwise, it's all going to be very arbitrary, and that's pretty much like when looking at starters, or whatever, right? The number I generally try to look for is 67%.
Okay.
Because then, all things equal, obviously a match 2 out of 3 is a very small sample size. You are hopefully seeing these cards in 2 games of the match.
Yeah.
And that's a gross oversimplification, but those are generally the thresholds that I strive for, right? Of like, okay, I'm playing enough starters, so I will see this card 67 to 70% of the time while minimizing the detrimental aspect of, oh, I'm playing 11 starters, I'm going to draw 3 of them in my opening hand. No, I'm going to play 7 or 8. I hit that number about 67 to 70%, and then I'm minimizing the chance I draw multiples.
That's a very cool way to look at it, actually. That's really insightful.
Yeah, that's how I've thought about deck building like this for probably 7 years, I want to say. Huh. And what inspired it is, unfortunately, the worst thing I can ever say. There was ironically, it was about Noble Knights. There was a
Perfect.
Yu-Gi-Oh! The Yu-Gi-Oh! Coverage site also has it used to have information about new releases. Now they kind of just make content creators do that, and they just kind of send them boxes, and then the content creators, open the box and talk about it. Uh-huh. They used to do written coverage of new products, which you can still see. They did this as recently as Mystic Fighters, I think. And in 2014 or 2013 maybe, there was an article. I used to read it literally every day when I was a wee lad. I mean, by that I mean I was 15 or 16, I guess, so not that young. But in 2012, 2013 or whatever, it must have been 2013 because after Cosmo Blazer, there was an article they posted about Noble Knights, the Noble Knight deck, and it was the most interesting to me because it was the first one that talked about the math behind Yu-Gi-Oh!
Really?
And it talked about how many equip spells you needed, and it literally, the images it had 3 Medrots, and I think a Rhoda, because Rhoda was at 1 at the time, and there was no Heritage of the Chalice, and it was a Medrot, and then it was explaining how many equip spells you needed to have in your deck to have an over 33.3% chance of drawing both in your opening hand. And talked about the differences between going first and going second. And to the best of my knowledge, it's the only one that I've read from the official Konami site that's actually talked about the math like that. But
that's very cool. And it's that Medrot was the first Merlin, that kind of thing.
Yes, that it was specifically about Medrot and Noble, because that was the deck I played in. When I was very casual, I just played Noble Knights. I just played Medrot and the equip spells, and I summoned boars when Shadow Daughters came out, and that was the deck I played at my locals for years. And it was just very interesting to me that the fact that it, a perfect storm, the fact that it happened to be about a deck I was playing and I was interested in it, and it really, it was the first time I read something and was like, maybe I shouldn't just be throwing random cards in my deck because I think they're good. Maybe I should be doing a little bit more due diligence into it. And that was actually what got me more interested in, math in general, and, back in high school and middle school when I really applied myself more into math, because I was like, man, I gotta learn more about statistics so I can make better Yu-Gi-Oh decks.
Oh wow,
that was
insane.
A really big motivator for me, actually. About kind of cool. Self-teaching myself a lot of this stuff.
You should submit that story to Konami. They'd be more willing to put more math into what they put out. Yeah. Get more kids interested in math.
Mm-hmm. So, and it's all come full circle that it's about Noble Knights now and Crystal Beasts.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. It's really all come full circle. You can play Noble Knights in your Crystal Beast deck, and it's optimal.
Yep. Yeah, yes, and it is optimal. That was why this is when I saw there was a Noble Knight card that searched a Crystal Beast card. I think I had everybody I knew messaged me this card and were like, they actually had a Noble Knight that Surge of Sapphire Pegasus. Like,
crazy.
You have to play this. And
this
I was
is
like,
Ryan's card. This is
literally
Ryan's
my card. So
is that article what got you interested in like making Noble Knight content on YouTube too? By the way,
yes, it is. Man, this is a big. I don't think I actually don't know which one started first. You know what? I think I was already doing that. I want to say. But I remember I made a video about that article. It's no longer up. But I remember I made a video about that article, and I explained. I think I read that article maybe 2 weeks after I started making videos. I guess for context. Despite the fact that I am currently a Duelist Academy coach, and I guess you could, by the metrics, arguably one of the most successful Yu-Gi-Oh players of all time. Cough, haha, very, very humble. I used to make Noble Knight YouTube videos in 2013 and 2014. So, humble beginnings, and those videos are not online anymore. But
quality content. Hey, if anyone finds it, well, you can get a hefty sum.
Yes. I think I still have some saved on one of my computers somewhere. To be honest, that if I find them, I'll put them up somewhere. But,
it smells like Patreon content to me.
Yeah, maybe. But I think it was like maybe like I think I had done like maybe 4 videos by that point, and then that article came out, and then I put Upstart Goblin in my deck, and from the article I actually taught myself how to do the math that they were doing. And I actually found that if you played 3 Upstart Goblin, you could play 1 less equip spell and get the same results or similar results. So I made a whole video about that, about how if you play 3 Upstart Goblin in your Noble Knight deck, you can actually play 7 equip spells instead of 8. God, that sounds so bad. Oh my god. That deck could have really benefited from higher deck count to draw less equip spells and play more starters, but anyway.
If Heritage of the Chalice existed back in the day.
Yeah, only that just came out 5 years too late, but So anyway, we got very sidetracked. You might cut some of that out, but
no, it was good. It was good.
So where were we on this? Right. So this is like the numbers here, they're not drastic enough that I think it points to like, oh, you have to play 60 or like you have to play 40. I think this is one that will maybe be determined by the consistency of the rest of your engines. Because you have a lot of engines going on in here, right? So you have the Neos Fusion stuff, which you're choosing to play 3 of because like you could just play 1, right?
Yeah.
Like you could make that determination of, oh, if you draw Neos Fusion, it's actually not nearly as bad as Red Eyes Fusion because it just says you can only summon you can only not summon for the rest of the turn.
So you just drop
so you can play your whole turn, then slam a Neos Fusion, and that's nice. And that's why, unlike Red Eyes Fusion, in these decks that even just play Anaconda, you can just play 3. You don't have to, but you can. It is an option.
Yeah.
There is a world where you can go, actually. Although, I think I would rather just, if I draw it, it's fine. Like, it's not likely, but if it happens, it happens. And then I'll just rely on Anaconda to actually tutor it if I don't have it. So that's a decision for later.
Oh, sorry. Do you think maybe it's actually better to just play 1 Neos Fusion in a going first deck, and if you are blinding second, then play the 3?
Probably. I think that's probably a better way to do it.
Okay.
Or you can even side multiples for when you go second.
Yeah.
Right? For when, like, oh, I won game 1, my opponent will go first. You can just side in Neos Fusion, and that's like a reasonable enough going second card. Like your side can consist of like Alpha Pankratops, Neos Fusion as sort of like your board breakers.
Yeah.
Right?
I like that idea.
And then maybe like you side Phantasme or something, or something like that to help you facilitate that. Yeah, that's not something that I have like the offhand answer of like you 100% should play 1 or 3 in this deck, but that's something that we can, as the deck building process advances, you make those determinations. Right. So you have enough, like there are enough of these cards that you're not playing. Like in theory, you could play 2 more Heritage House and you could play 2 more Crystal Bonds. So we'll come back to the actual Crystal Beast part of it, right? Like we've just determined you could play up to 16 copies of this card. So we know there are options available. If we end up having a 60 card deck, we could just slap in a few more, and your consistency for accessing these cards will be the same. The Tri-Brigades, you're at the limit of how many you can play, right? You're playing 3 Tanky, you're playing 3 Fractal. You really can't play more, right? Like these are the maximum number of legal searchers for this archetype. So,
and of course,
so if you are looking,
no, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. And then, so if you're looking for more consistency on that end, you're not going to find it, right? Like you're going to probably build, or as far as like the number of cards in your deck, you're probably going to make that determination based not on the Crystal Beast engine, because as we know, there are 16 of them. You can build a 60-card Crystal Beast deck and put all these in, and you know, we know that will work. It'll be determined by how consistently you want to see the TriBrigade cards, and maybe even the Nemesis cards.
Yeah, Nemesis are just nice. They're just like cool extenders, because the Shield Bearer really like enables them a lot more, because Zenith banishes himself, but then the Shield Bearer also is just like, okay, now I've got to play Nemesis. They're just free extenders. Flag is a special summon from hand and is +1, so it's kind of like Ecclesia, and then Escatos is just a really easy win condition.
For sure. And that's actually interesting that I want to... This is something else I want to touch on.
Yeah.
So, something that a lot of people, I think... Oh, man, it's not relevant what the first deck I applied this to, but I'm trying to think of what it was for my own sanity. A lot of people, when looking at these cards, how they will default to looking at it is they will go, okay, the Nemesis cards don't do anything on their own. They only work if you already have tier Crystal Beast. That's not entirely true because the TriBrigades, but we'll, let's just not touch on those yet.
Pretty much just Crystal Beast.
Because there's a lot more that has to be going on with the TriBrigades to enable the Nemesis, but if you just resolve a Pegasus or, any of these cards, a Nemesis card is live, right?
Yeah.
So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you have 12 of your Crystal Beast guys. And what a lot of people will default to is they'll go, okay, so you have 12 Crystal Beasts, you got to draw at least one. Wait, I actually need a third category. I don't know. I don't think that's how you spell it. It's this? Whatever. No, it's just Nemesis. You know how the word Nemesis sounds, even though that's not the correct spelling of it in whatever. So you got 12 of those, and then you've got 3 of the red Nemesis. That's the starter one. And let's just say 25 in a 40-card deck, just hypothetically. Yeah. They will look at this and they'll go, okay, the odds of drawing the guy and the Nemesis. Oh, you draw more than one card. That's ridiculous. You draw 5. Whoops. You only have a 26% chance of doing this combo. That's not very consistent. Like, why are you playing it? That number is literally irrelevant. It literally does not matter. Like, the consistency of this card, it does not matter how often you actually draw the combo. The only number that actually matters
if you see
is
the
how
Nemesis,
often
not
you brick on the Nemesis. That is the only card that's the one that actually matters. So, because if you don't draw a Nemesis, who cares if it's not live? Right? If Nemesis flag is in your deck, who cares? Yeah. It's not in your hand. It doesn't matter if you have a banished card. You didn't draw it, right? I guess I'll say there's 4 because you have the yellow, the green one too.
No, that one doesn't. It's not a starter. It's literally just
it's not a starter, but it's an extender at least. So like you can summon it. So like drawing it and not drawing Crystal Beast is a brick pretty much, right?
I guess.
So we'll count that one. So now the odds of drawing. This is the odds of drawing exactly 1. And then we're going to have to, because now this is where it gets a little bit rough, because we are specifically drawing 0 Crystal Beasts, we will just have to add up the odds of drawing 1 Nemesis, 2 Nemesis, 3 Nemesis, and 4 Nemesis, and that is how that works, unfortunately. We just have to add these numbers up based on how this is set up here. So 6% plus 1.85, that's a 6.5, that's 1.5, that's like 8.5 about... plus 8, still about 8.5, maybe like 9 because I rounded down a little bit on the other ones. And literally the odds of drawing all 4 Nemesis and no guy is literally such a small number. This program does not have the ability, because it is less than 1 in. It's like less than 1 in 10,000, right? So it just can't even tell you. So it's about 8%, 8.5% about to draw in a 40-card deck to draw a Nemesis without one of your 12 Crystal Beast cards. Okay. When you have more cards in your deck, which you do, then it just gets even lower, right? And then
really, I don't understand that actually. How, even though you're testing the same cards, you're testing the 12 Pegasus versus the 4 Nemesis.
Maybe I said that wrong. I think you're right. I think because you're just adding more. Well, You're right. It actually that won't decrease it. That only decreases it when you put more Pegasus in.
Okay.
Right. So when you go to I guess this was wrong to be testing it with 12 Pegasus on a 40 card deck. We should have been testing it with like 8, but you are right. I did say that wrong. Because you're just adding not Pegasus cards, that doesn't actually affect that. But when we go to sense. Like 60 cards, right, and then we put more Pegasus. Like let's say that we're here and we're like, okay, let's Pegasus. Do the Crystal Bond. Let's say we're putting in one more Crystal Bond. We're putting in one more Heritage, right? Because we have determined this is the number we need for our Nemesis minions. How many is this? Just that, right? Yeah. Okay. Something like that. Close? 1%? Yeah. So this is one... Let me see. How does this work? 0.3, yeah. It'll be... So this is one, as long as you also increase the... So now, okay, drawing multiple Nemesis, because we have a higher deck count, obviously, drawing multiple Nemesis will be lower. Just in general, okay. or drawing, and also something to point out as well. The combo, I guess, as I'll call it, lovingly in quotes, the combo of drawing both of them will go down because you've added more cards in your deck, right? And you haven't added more Nemesis cards. You've only added more. Actually, well, the green one doesn't count. So let's just, because you've added more cards in your deck and you haven't added more Nemesis flag, you've only added more of the Crystal Beast guys. The actual combo will be less consistent, but that's not what you're building your deck around, right? And there aren't more ways to search this Nemesis card. So if you are trying to build your deck around the interaction of Shield Bearer and the Nemesis flag, then... I keep doing that. Then, okay, we've hit a roadblock in deck building. There aren't enough cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! That will allow this to happen consistently, right? Unfortunate, but that's not the point. As you mentioned, you're trying this as a supplementary engine. Whether or not this makes it into the final product is its own thing. But basically, even though you'll only actually resolve this combo 1 out of every 5 games, that doesn't really, that's not the number that really... I mean, it does matter, obviously, that, okay, this is going to happen 1 out of every 5 games. 1 out of every 12 games, you're going to draw this and not have the ability to resolve it, right? So then you have to weigh the pros and cons of that. Okay, 1 out of every 12 games, I'm gonna have this dead card in my hand. For the payoff of 1 out of every 5 games, I get this crazy play. Yeah. Pot of Prosperity also changes these numbers a little bit. Other people have done a lot of great videos on Pot of Prosperity. I even think we've talked about it at least once personally, so I'm not going to report that. Yeah, he's done a great video on it. About how, the way it adjusts your probability, you actually have to take into account the fact that you don't draw Prosperity every hand. You only draw Prosperity, 40-something% of the time. I don't remember offhand how many. And then if you play a larger deck, you draw Prosperity even less. So this is one of the cards, as I mentioned with Desires earlier in the Zephyr deck, this is one of the cards that is pretty much irreplaceable, right? Yeah. You can't play more copies of Pot of Prosperity in this deck. So when you are going above 40 to mitigate drawing the worse cards, obviously these are the cards you don't want to draw because these are the ones you would rather not draw. Yeah. The Barrier Statue and the Neos aren't as bad as drawing the Cobalt Eagle and the Rainbow Dragon. Drawing the Rainbow Dragon is the worst one by far, obviously. So yeah. So the trade-off is, it is not 100% superior, to build your deck with more cards, with redundant search cards, just to minimize bricks, because there are some cards that are irreplaceable. Ash Ball is another one, right? Sure, you could play more hand traps. You could play Bell, but Bell and Ash are not the same. I'm not saying Bell is 100% worse than Ash every single time, but cards like Gamma are less comparable, right? And Nibiru. If you determine you want Gamma and Nibiru in your deck, playing more than 40 cards significantly reduces, not significantly, but it reduces the chance of seeing those cards, and there really is no replacement for those cards. Same kind of with Droplet. You can maybe get away with, if Droplet's in your deck, maybe you play Dark Ruler, and that's, pretty similar a lot of the time. Yeah. But obviously it's not identical, right? It's not redundant cards that literally search all the same copy of a card. So that is where you have to. So that is the give and the take. Is you're like, all right, I have enough search cards that I can play a larger deck, and it reduces the number of these bricks that I will be drawing, hopefully. But there are some cards I will see less often, right? Yeah. We are no longer trying to draw the 1 of Heavy Storm, we're trying to draw the 3 of Forbidden Droplet. And increasing our deck size will make that a little bit smaller.
You know what I just remembered with the Nemesis, too, is you could actually just normal summon them. It's like Ecclesia.
I didn't know that, honestly. That's pretty cool. I had no idea you could normal summon this card. I have never read the. I have actually never read the. I did not know that. I would never. If you hadn't said that, I don't think I would have ever thought about that. Yeah, that is funny.
So it doesn't even if you don't draw any of your banished pieces, it doesn't even hurt you. You can still just normal summon it and then search a Nemesis. But I guess you won't have a banish to summon the corridor that you search. But if you can combo off and get an Excatos out, like if you draw the TriBrigade stuff, maybe.
Yeah, that is funny. I didn't even realize that. But obviously not ideal. You'd rather draw it with
right
with the other guys. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers a lot. Have I made sense this whole time? Any specific points you'd like me to go over?
Yeah, I'd kind of I guess with the TriBrigade's Foolish Bird, it also counts as a starter because you could Foolish the Kit and then a Nerval, and then search Fractal. So that's pretty cool.
It's very similar to it's one less Beast Warrior when compared to Fractal. But as far as it goes with just like Foolish Kit, Nerval, search a Fractal, normal summon Fractal.
Yeah.
Get the Bear Bloom. It's pretty much the same thing. So you are maximizing on the number of cards that you can play to achieve that.
Yeah. So just looking at this deck, would you try and make it more towards 40 cards or 60 cards or maybe 50? And then what do you determine to figure out the right number? Maybe 52 is the right number, how do you know what the right number is?
So for this, I think it'll require a bit more. It'll require punching more numbers into that calculator. Sure. I think. Yeah. It's because I think you also need to find a number you're happy with the TriBrigades. So basically, the number of cards you don't need to punch the numbers in. A number you should never punch in again. Now that I just showed it to just demonstrate is building to 60 or to 45 or whatever, because that's a cutoff for drawing Rainbow Dragon, Lesser Cobalt Eagle. The frequency of you drawing Cobalt Eagle or Rainbow Dragon, the exact number literally doesn't matter. If you play more cards, you will draw them less. If you play less cards, you will draw them more.
Yeah.
That is a constant. That is always true, right? If you play 40 cards, you will draw Cobalt Eagle more often than if you play 60. The exact pinpoint number from there does not matter. What actually matters is how much consistency can we maintain with our engine while increasing the number of cards in our deck. Because our goal, by increasing our number of cards, we are being rewarded by drawing these cards less, and we're being punished by maybe drawing other cards less as well. How much consistency can we actually maintain while increasing our deck count slightly? So you're going to have to determine, as I said, the numbers I usually use, whether or not they're 100% correct, but I find remaining consistent, at least for myself, has been reasonably successful, is that 67 to 70% mark, right?
Yeah.
I would love to be able to say, about 70% of my games, I'll see my starting cards, right? Yeah. That's the number I usually strive for. That's how Yu-Gi-Oh is formatted. So let's look at the TriBrigade. So we have 3 Fractal, 3 Tanky,
one Foolish. The 7. It's like Alistair.
Kit, I don't really think Kit. I think you can arguably play.
I am running Almirage, so
yeah. But the thing is, you can run Almirage, so you can do Kit to send Nerval. But then unless you draw another, I guess you can discard Pegasus to summon Karis. That's pretty cool. That's an interesting synergy. So that does actually probably work. Is if you draw Kit with Kit or Nerval, well, specifically Kit. Nerval is kind of worse, because if you just draw Nerval, you don't really. I guess you discard Pegasus. So maybe that does work. because you have enough of these searches. Again, as I said, this is like to put into this pretty. This is just a calculator with a coat of paint to have a user interface to make it, as I said, easier for people like me to understand.
Yeah,
it is going to be near impossible to just fill out on just like a literal. This is essentially like a 4-function calculator with an interface. For me, like it's going to be almost impossible to put something in to determine like, okay, how often will kit be live when in conjunction. That's where I think a literal simulator will give you the exact numbers. But I will tentatively count kit as a starter because it works with your 12 Pegasus that you'll see most of the time anyway. So we have 2 kit.
Do we want to say like drawing a TriBrigade starter in addition to Pegasus? Because the TriBrigades won't really be able to accomplish much on their own, right?
Well, I mean, like they do. So, for example, if you just go like, Fractal, send kit, send Nerval, search something, normal summon it, get Bear Bloom, link it away into, whatever, you at least get to Revolt, right? Like, and then you summon, Rugal Revolt, and like, then you at least have an interrupt. Obviously, it's not your full combo, but like you didn't brick, right? Like you presented a threat. So I do think that's relevant enough that if you draw one of these, you didn't brick, you kind of played. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you kind of got, I'm going to say 9 TriBrigade starters. Nerval's a little bit worse. I think Kit's the one that will probably be more reasonable. So you've got, 9, and then we had like a 52 card deck. So I'm just going to put these as 0 and then 43. So then the odds of drawing at least one of these, again, 62, 63%. So that's pretty good if we're going to be generous and count Nerval, because Nerval does function when you also draw like Pegasus that you can discard, stuff like that. About 71%. So, and then we can take a few percentages off. This is one that you're going to have to estimate of like, it's not actually 71% because not every single time you draw Kit or Nerval will it be live. Right. So it is a little bit lower. So, so I'm not 100% satisfied with the numbers on TriBrigades. I think they're very close, right? To where I'm satisfied with it, to the point that like, if you're looking at these and you're like, okay, maybe the Nemesis stuff is too much bloat, or maybe you don't need the extra Neos fusion, stuff like that, right? Like that's kind of where I am at this point, is it's like, all right, if I cut this down a little bit, or this is close to the deck count I want. Maybe I want the deck count to be something like if we don't count the Nerval, again, because it's a little bit of a stretch to count the Nerval. And we say we have a 50 card deck, we're about 64%. Okay, what if we say we have a 48 card deck? Like how close are we? 66%. Okay. So the number I'm looking for probably, because and then we'll also reevaluate the Crystal Beast number, because I think 9 to 10 is about the number you want to be going on here. So it's possible you just cut a Heritage of the Chalice because it's pretty redundant at this point.
Okay.
And you can just keep.
I mean, which one's more?
Or you would keep Rhoda. You keep Heritage of the I guess this is just technically better.
More optimal. If your opponent equips your Noble Knight with the Noble Arms, you can add it back from grade. But then again, Rhoda can be played at a higher rarity, so
technically.
50-50.
So if we're looking at like 30, let's look at like a 48 card deck. Okay, so I said like roughly, I'm gonna say I want to be shooting for the range of like 47 to 50 is the range for this deck I want to be shooting for. And then let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we can probably stand to cut one of the Crystal Beasts. If we cut the deck a little bit, if we are cutting down the deck a little bit, we can probably stand to cut one of the Crystal Beasts. Or you can just keep it, and it's just a buffer. Again, you're playing one more card, so you'll draw the Rainbow Dragon in 100 games. You'll draw it one less time out of 100 games by putting in, whatever, or maybe something like that. It is reasonable. Or you cut out some of the Nemesis cards and you put in defensive cards. But I think for now, I think you're going first deck. I think I would move some of the Neos fusions to the side. And then and then maybe you trim like one Noble, you trim like the Rhoda and then you're pretty close to the numbers I want to be seeing on these cards, right?
Okay.
And then you can argue, okay, the Nemesis cards aren't part of my main combo. If I think my main engine is strong enough, which is the TriBrigades and the Crystal Beast, these can be defensive cards, right? Mm-hmm. Because these are not part of your main engine. These won't really affect your consistency.
Right.
Like, these don't help you. These don't unbrick you. Like, if you cut Nemesis Flag for a Bell, if you draw a Bell and brick, a Nemesis Flag wouldn't have unbricked you.
Yeah.
Right. It would be the same thing.
Right.
But now it's a defensive card instead of a potentially win more combo piece that isn't necessary. But again, I have not played this deck. I have not, seen what this deck does completely and how the Nemesis cards help you play through. Like, maybe the Nemesis cards help you play through disruptions when you go second, and that's really important in this deck, maybe. Mm-hmm. So that's something to be determined by playing it. I think like the last thing I want to touch on, my last like little side note for theory crafting a deck versus play testing is you should never play test to determine the cards in your deck. You should never go like, okay, is Nemesis Flag gonna be this or is it gonna be Bell? And then you play 10 games and go, Nemesis Flag was not good in 6 of my games, so I'm gonna cut it. That is a super, super small sample size, and that seems exaggerated, but a lot of people do that in a less like clear cut manner. Yeah. They will like lose a game and they will brick on Nemesis Flag. So we just did the math, right? And well, we didn't do the math for a 49 card deck with exactly this many starters with TriBrigade ever. But like we've determined, you brick on Nemesis Flag, let's say 7 to 8% of the time, right? Like, that is a number, we've determined this. Mm-hmm. If you play a million games, the variance of how many times you brick on Nemesis Flag doesn't matter. Yeah. Right? You will brick on it 8% of the time. That is a fact. Right? Yeah. I mean, maybe a little less because we didn't really count the TriBrigade. So if you do a TriBrigade thing and, like, banish TriBrigades and then summon Nemesis Flag, you'll actually brick on it less than 8% of the time. You might actually brick on it, like, 5% roughly. Okay. Something like that. If I'm just gauging the number of TriBrigade starters. Yeah. So you'll probably brick on it about 5% of the time, right? You know that. 1 in every 20 games, I will draw this card, and it will not be proactive. Actually sitting down and losing a game because you draw Nemesis Flag, you shouldn't go, I lost because I drew Nemesis Flag, I'm taking it out of my deck. Like, we knew that was what was going to happen. Like, we did the math already. Like you put it in your deck with the accepting 1 in every 20 games, this card will not be good. But 1 in every 5 games, this card will be insane. Yeah. And that's the trade-off that you're taking is, I want my deck to be stronger, therefore I am going to put this in. If when you're playing, you realize, my deck actually plays through things very well. I didn't realize how much I actually have Crystal Promise and Crystal Bond, and I have Zenith, and I have the TriBrigades, and I have Karis, and the redundant Crystal Beasts that I'm searching are actually good to discard for Karis, and I can do a lot more than I thought. Maybe you don't need Nemesis Flag. And that's not something of like, oh, I won when I drew it, or I lost when I drew it, or whatever. That doesn't matter. You make these determinations when you learn more about how your deck functions and how your deck interacts with the rest of the field. You shouldn't be looking at the results of individual games and making card choices based on that. It shouldn't be like, Droplet was bad this game, therefore I'm cutting it. You need to take a step back and have a wider lens and be like, why was Droplet bad? What is the metagame doing? Are they doing things that Dark Ruler would be better for? Are they if you're consistently getting FTK'd, Droplet's probably not very good. Yeah. Right? But the bigger reason isn't I lost, so Droplet is bad. The bigger reason is I am literally getting FTK'd. I don't get a turn to activate Droplet. I need a hand trap, right? Yeah. And that defensive card should be a hand trap, right? That's a bigger because by taking that step back, it'll also help you figure out what card should be there. Or in your case, maybe a smaller deck, right? If you are playing this and you go, oh, actually, I don't think the Nemesis cards matter. I don't think they're needed. This deck functions very well. It flows very well. I actually think I can go with a smaller deck. And maybe you cut the Nemesis cards and then you can, cut Rhoda or you can cut Heritage and a Foolish and put in a couple hand traps, and then you're playing a 47 card deck instead of 49, with those additions. something like that, and then you adjust your starters accordingly if that's the route that you go.
Yeah, it makes sense. For sure. That actually kind of transitions into what I wanted to ask you next about defensive cards in a larger deck. Like, I know for a 40-card deck, you play usually 6, in a 40-card deck, but then how does that change, when you're going above 40? And I got 6 just from Hoban's book.
Okay, so good one. So Hoban's book, that book was written a long time ago. Yeah. Yu-Gi-Oh is very, very different now, because hand traps kind of weren't really much of a thing. There was Valor and Maxi, and those are very different from Ash and Nibiru and Phantasma and all these cards. I would say also, I don't think it's advisable to stick to hard and fast rules like that, because I think there's a lot more nuance in deck building now than there was. If you show a deck like this to somebody that was a pro Yu-Gi-Oh player in 2009, they will have no idea what is going on. Right? And by that I mean they'll be like, why are you just like the numbers of cards you're playing literally make no sense. Yeah. Right? To them. Or maybe it's 2009, maybe like 2015. I think if you show this somebody who played a lot in 2015 and didn't play after that would just have no idea why you're playing like the numbers of cards that you're playing or whatever. But I will say, before YCS Melbourne, I sat in my hotel room. I actually, on this exact program, I sat in my hotel room with Jake Quincy for 2 hours doing the math behind how many hand traps I wanted and how many cards I wanted to be in my deck. Okay. And the trade-off between playing... So the event was the following night, so I had a very limited amount of time. And that's generally why when you see people play decks that are like not exactly optimized, it's probably because they ran out of time. Yeah. Like, I played a 41-card deck at that event. Should I have played 41? Absolutely not. I should have definitely found, like, one of the cards in my deck was the worst card in my deck. I wasn't playing more than 40 to mitigate drawing anything. I just did not have time to identify what the worst card in my deck was. Okay. So I was either going to play 40... Which one was it,
do you think? Looking back, which one was it, do you think?
Oh, evenly matched. The card's unplayable. Evenly matched. It was awful.
It's only good the first week it came out, right?
Huh?
You say it's only good the first week it came out, and then ever since it's only good when you draw multiples.
It was from the newest set, and people still hadn't quite learned to play around it. But by the end of the tournament, I sided it out every single round. It was really bad in the mirror against people who knew what they were doing, and the formatting developed to the point that people did. But it was like, I played. If you look at that deck, oh my god! Like, again, that's a deck that if you look at and you don't know me and you haven't heard me explain this, so people will look at that and go like, that literally makes no sense. Is he dumb? I played 41 cards with two evenly matched. And
Crazy.
That's because I was playing a deck previously. It was a 40-card deck with 3, and I didn't have Reaper in my deck. Or no, I didn't have I only had 2 Foolish Burial Goods in my deck. Okay. And I determined I wanted a 3rd Foolish Burial Goods. And maybe I didn't have Reaper. I think there was like some other card I didn't have. And I determined I needed those cards, and I was like, okay, I'm playing Ash, Gamma, Reaper, and evenly matched. And it was like, I don't want to play 40 with 1 evenly matched. That just seems even worse. Right? Yeah. Like and then I was like, I don't want to play 40 with 2 evenly, like 2 Reaper. So I was sitting there doing the math on, like, okay, if I play 8 hand traps and then I play, 40 cards, right? Okay, it's 69.4%. If I play 9 hand traps with 41 cards, it's actually 73%. And I was like, okay, that's more in line where I want to be. I'm getting to be, that was one where I thought a hand trap was so important. And then here, and then if I cut evenly matched, for example, then it's 74%. And I was like, if this number had gotten me over the 75% threshold, very arbitrarily, I would have played 1 evenly matched in my deck. I would have cut it to 40 and played 1 evenly matched. But I determined the chance of doubling the chance of drawing evenly matched, which was still good against other matchups, just not against Spiral. Doubling the chance of me drawing evenly matched to play it as my 41st card, as opposed to cutting a Reaper or cutting it evenly, it was also negligible.
Yeah.
I just or like it was also seemingly negligible, but I think the extra percentages of playing the 9th hand trap mattered enough to me that that's what I went with. And
okay.
I wouldn't say definitively you should play 9 hand traps in every deck you play, because obviously that doesn't make sense. Like, a lot of different situations can call for a lot of different things. It depends on the format.
Yeah.
So for a deck like this, again, I would try to determine a number that you're comfortable with. It also depends on, I'm going to keep switching back. It also depends on what defensive cards are good in the format, and how often they will stop your opponent from doing anything.
Yeah.
Like, for example, in like Dragon format, when like Link Cross was still legal, a single Ash Blossom really wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
You had to draw multiple hand traps. Like, you probably had to have Ash and Imperm, or Nibiru and Imperm, or Ash Nibiru, or something like that, right? Like, you almost always needed 2. And the board breaking cards weren't as good because it was really hard to beat the Dragon Buster that locked you out of the extra deck. So, you really had to play more hand traps because the deck was super oppressive. If you didn't have 9 to 12 hand traps, they were almost always comboing off and you were just dying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on the number of defensive cards that you should play. I think usually depend on the form. I mean, they depend on the deck as well, but they usually depend on the format and the popularity of more oppressive decks in the format. So we're about to enter Lightning Overdrive. That comes out in a week, right? I guess the sneak peek is tomorrow or something. Just to date this video. Now it's irrelevant to everyone who isn't watching this on May 28th. But I think we're gonna see TriBrigade and we're gonna see Drytron are the 2 emerging decks that are going to be pretty popular after that.
For sure.
One of those is very different. Drytron, you probably need hand traps to stop, or they will have Herald of Perfection with 38 fairies in their hand, and however many other things on their field that you can't interact with.
Dude, everyone's talking about U Beta, but Diviner is the biggest one for me.
Diviner is crazy.
Diviner's
Well, they're both
insane.
crazy, but yes.
Yeah.
And then TriBrigade, which you're actually playing in this deck as well, they are a bit more grind focused. They're not putting up a crazy board that your opponent can't play through. They're just putting up efficient floaters, right?
Yeah.
They're gonna revolt back all their cards, and they're gonna search with Nerval and whatever, and they're gonna summon Shurag as an interrupt, and then they're gonna search more cards, and then they're gonna go from there, right?
Yeah.
They're not locking you out of the game turn 1. They are forcing you into a grind where they will have the advantage in the grind game. So hand traps against Drytron are much, much, much better because you need to stop them from making their board, and if you stop their initial board and then you can set something up, they probably won't have enough to come back. TriBrigade, if you have these low impact hand traps, if they can amount to anything, their floaters will eventually put them much higher resources than you are, because you'll be throwing your hand traps into their relatively low impact effects that are also going to float back more cards.
Right.
So you need to determine how you're building your deck, what deck you want your main deck to be, and then your side deck hopefully can pick up the slack, right? Where you go, okay, I think Drytron is the bigger menace. I'm going to take out these Nemesis. These cards are probably really good against TriBrigade because it lets you play a grindier game. And actually, if they Shurag you, it actually banishes something, and then you can summon Nemesis Flag, and that's pretty cool, right? And then you can summon and then you can call, especially in the mirror,
just call beast.
you can call whichever Tri-Beast type you don't want your opponent to have access to on the following turn, right? You can put something up, and then you can Escatos, and then that might just end the game. If you go, hey, I don't want to get Shuragged, I'm going to summon my Nerval, and then I'm going to call Winged Beast, and now they can't Shurag me. Right? And maybe the game ends. Against Drytron, you might just be dead before you can even use this, right? Yeah. And then you're going to go, wow, I wish this was a hand trap.
I wish this was Bell.
Yes, I wish this was anything. So whatever you end up making your main deck, I think you have to determine, okay, there are different sides of this format. Whichever one my main deck doesn't address, I will need to address in my side deck.
Yeah.
And right now it's like Droplet and Ash. I'm not sure why these are the specific ones that you picked. It doesn't really matter why these are the specific ones in here right now. Mm-hmm. But right now, these are the slots in the deck
And droplet.
They could be anything, right? Something that a lot of people like.
Synergizes with tanky. That's pretty much it.
Sure, yes. Sure. Like, I think a lot of people don't realize how easily, like, you can just take this deck. The Droplet and Ash can be literally any card in the whole game.
Yeah.
And it will not affect the consistency of your deck.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're not your engine. They can be literally anything. So if the metagame shifts and you determine these cards are not optimal, take them out, put in something else. It's that simple.
Yeah.
I feel like 6 defensive cards is a little low for Drytron about to come out, especially in a larger deck. Because it all kind of follows the same principle, is if you wanted 6 defensive cards in a 40-card deck, when you add more cards, you probably, now you're in a 49-card deck, you probably want 7 or 8 defensive cards.
Okay.
Because that will line up better to those numbers that you're looking for, right? Where you want to have, if you really want at least 1 defensive card in your hand, as often as possible, but without drawing too many, still kind of the same principles that we've been talking about. It's basically, like, as far as the math goes and the number you should be playing, it's basically just the same as a starter, right?
Yeah.
You want to maximize the odds of seeing 1 or 2 and minimize the odds of drawing a ton of them.
Yeah. So for 40-card decks,
around 7.
Yeah. For 40-card decks, which number of defensive cards do you usually lean towards? Like, I don't want to say, like, in an average format, because it changes format to format, but I don't want to say, like, average format, but over the course of most formats, which number do you find yourself including in your 40-card deck?
Oh, it depends. I mean, it definitely just depends on how many the deck can support. Like, some decks have a ton of engine. On, like, my Dragon Link deck, I play, like, 3, because I want to have 37 proactive Dragon card, maybe 5 or 6, right? But, like, for the most part, my deck is just engine. And I want to be able to play. I think if I can play, then I will probably win, because I think my deck is generally stronger than my opponent's. For my TriBrigade deck, I think I have like 15, because the TriBrigade engine is so much smaller. Yeah. And as we talked about, this is almost a full TriBrigade engine. A pure TriBrigade deck plays 1 more Nerval and 1 more Kit, and that's like it.
Yeah.
Because there aren't more TriBrigade cards, right? Like it's just a relatively small engine that tries to play with as few cards as possible, and then the rest of your cards are just efficient cards. So it's dependent on both the format and the deck. It depends on what the deck is trying to do, and and it is a strength and a weakness of these decks. So yes, TriBrigade has a small engine, so you can play a lot of defensive cards. But it also means you will brick more often, because you don't have as many starters in your deck, because you are literally maxing out on all of them. And it's tanky, fractal, Kit, Nerval, and that's like it. There's not, you can't play more tankies, like you can't play more of these cards. And if you don't draw these and you're just stuck on your trap cards, you're not really doing anything. Zoos are proactive and they help you play a little bit, but they're not quite the same. So it does depend on the format and the deck as well. But I guess I'm going to give you a cop-out answer and say as many as my deck can support. I think this deck probably could support a couple more. Like, as I said, I think if you go back into the numbers and you're like, well, maybe I need, like, I can play, like 1 less. I can play, like, maybe I don't play Foolish, and I'd make that, into, like, a hand trap. Or you just play a 50th card and just make it a hand trap or something like that. And that affects the consistency of your starters minimally, because we've kind of already optimized it around this number of cards. And then you're putting more defensive cards in your deck, so you'll just automatically lose the game less often to these crazy combos.
For sure. I guess I just had one more final thought, like one more final question for you. Is just like, what are your thoughts on Prosperity versus Blossom in the extra deck, the Farragut Blossom TriBrigade? Because obviously Prosperity restricts you from using her effect, and that effect is pretty big in this deck to put back the Rainbow Dragon. That's one of the reasons why TriBrigade is so awesome with Crystal Beast, is it helps with that. It helps solve that problem where you can resolve multiple Zeniths in one game without running multiple Rainbow Dragons, But then Prosperity obviously keeps you from doing that because you can't draw the cards in the same turn. But what do you think about increasing your deck to minimize the chances of seeing TriBrigade stuff versus Pot of Prosperity? Obviously, TriBrigade plus Crystal Beast stuff, of course, because you want to put back the Rainbow Dragon.
Yeah. So in that instance, it's like the odds of them conflicting are very low. Not to say it won't happen, but to say that, like, Pot of Prosperity is in your deck because it gives you consistency, right?
Yeah.
And the factors that you're describing of I've activated Prosperity, therefore I cannot use Fergie, which means I cannot put Rainbow Dragon back in the bottom of my deck, so I can't use Zenith, require a number of things to be true before it is relevant. It means you drew Pot of Prosperity, which is a 3 of in your 45 to 50 card deck. So it's maybe one in every third game, right? So okay, 30% of the time you've drawn your Prosperity, maybe a little bit more. That's step 1. Step 2, you drew Prosperity and Rainbow Dragon. So those cards are both in your hand. That is significantly less often because Rainbow Dragons are 1 of. So now you're on the odds of drawing a 3 of with the specific 1 of, which is significantly lower. Now we're probably about less than 1 in 10 game territory. 1 every 20, I believe, roughly. I think it's about 5% to open that. And you don't have a way to play with your remaining 3 cards. Because if you have a way to play with your remaining 3 cards, you could just not use Prosperity, use Fergie to put Rainbow Dragon on the bottom, play your turn, and just use Prosperity next turn. So that one is a much harder thing to much more complicated to figure out of, okay, because I have Rainbow Dragon and Prosperity, I can't play. Now, when you're activating Prosperity, in theory, Prosperity should give you a way to play that, maybe you look at that and go, okay, Rainbow Dragon's in my hand, I have no way to play, I can't use my Crystal Beast engine, I'm now going to Prosperity for 6 to dig for a TriBrigade.
Okay.
Because that is now what you're playing towards.
Yeah.
You're now playing towards... I'm now playing... All right, I'm going to banish 6. I'm going to just dig for a TriBrigade card.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to summon Fergie this turn. I'm going to summon it next turn. And I'm just going to go for the Revolt, Shurag thing.
Gotcha.
And I'm going to get rid of, my rank 4s and whatever, or, like most of them.
Yeah.
Maybe Rainbow Neos. And we're going to go from there.
Okay.
So I think it's very unlikely, not impossible, because obviously, if you play this deck enough, it will happen.
Yeah.
Right. Like everything will happen. I think it's funny that it's like, those of us that play these types of games, like, some things happen and they seem so unlikely, and then you think about it and it's like, well, I guess that has only happened once.
Yeah.
And I've played 200,000 matches of Yu-Gi-Oh. So I guess that checks out. Like everybody can remember the crazy hands that they've drawn, and it's like, well, yes, you're probably gonna yes, you will draw triple ash triple ash barrier statue cobalt eagle once when you play your deck for 20 hours in a row. Like that will happen, and people really latch on to the one to the few down, the few, because as we saw when looking at these, mathematically, it doesn't happen as often as people think it does. They do just remember it's like, what is confirmation bias? It's like an evolutionary thing that this was bad, therefore I remember it so I don't repeat it.
Yeah.
But that's you have to overcome that and be like, all right, mathematically, this isn't what happens usually.
They just remember how it made them feel.
Yes, and not what actually happened. Because you probably won some of those games where those things happened too. I'm sure there are a number of times where people are like, man, I drew triple droplet and could barely play. Oh, what happened? Oh, I won. It's like, okay, so who cares? What does that even mean?
And if you pull off that crazy combo that you never thought you could do, and then be like, oh, did you end up winning? No, I lost, but it was still really cool. It's like, should you really be playing that combo then?
Correct. Absolutely. So, I mean, as far as the I think if that's really a consideration of minimizing TriBrigades or minimizing Prosperities, it's just don't play one of the two. But I don't think that's, I think Fergie it's there when you don't draw Prosperity, because Prosperity is an unsearchable card that you don't see every game. Then Fergie will function. If you draw the Rainbow Dragon, or if you search the Rainbow Dragon, you put it back on the bottom of your deck, and then you're, That's great. So as opposed to, I think maybe what you were talking about, if you have to use prosperity, right? So let's say that you don't brick and you don't draw a Rainbow Dragon, and you just go Zenith, search Rainbow Dragon. Now I've prosperitied. Now I don't have the option to Farigide it on the bottom to do it again next turn. I think that literally doesn't matter.
Okay.
I think that does not matter. You've already done your combo. You've already played the game. It's like pretty irrelevant if you're setting up and like an extra thing for your next turn right now.
Yeah.
Because on turn 2, if that's really important, you can just not summon Farigide on your first turn. You can just summon it on your second turn, maybe, and then put Rainbow Dragon under. And like, because I think the necessity of resolving 2 Zeniths in one game, like, if you haven't set yourself up sufficiently to win when everything goes right, you're probably playing the wrong deck.
Okay.
Like, you know, if you need literally every little extra advantage and you cannot squeak out a win unless every single thing goes right for you, you should probably try something else.
You're right. Absolutely. For sure. Thank you for hitting me with reality like that. I appreciate it. Oh yeah, why do people play I know that was my last question, but like this one is just more of an outrageous thing. Why do people play the Mist Valley, Apex Avian, and the Barrier Statue in a 40-card deck? I don't understand. Like, it was mostly for Bird Up, but if you remember that.
I mean, yeah. It's like, they're powerful. I think Apex Avion's a little less reasonable, I think. But something from hand, right? I think we've established this already. We talked about it. All coming back, because we talked about this an hour and a half ago.
Wow.
Where we determined that it can summon from the hand.
Insane.
All right, yeah. I mean, if you draw them, it's whatever, I guess. Like, that's probably the mentality. I think it's reasonable.
Okay.
I guess. I don't know. I think the Apex Avion is a little less reasonable anyway. I think that's like a crazy win more card. Like, if you summon the Barrier Statue and your opponent passes and your Simorgh survived, you do not need Apex Avion to win the game, I hope. But I understand, like, you know, some decks you need Apex Avion instead of the Barrier Statue anyway, but that's probably more of a side pick.
Okay. Gotcha.
Or a Dark Simorgh or something.
Ooh. Anti-spell?
Yeah. Dark Simorgh is also just that's a card that you could easily side. If you go first against a trap deck, you just Simorgh out a Dark Simorgh, and that's pretty good.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Well, that about covers everything I wanted to ask you about this. You really blew all these questions out of the park, you know, for sure.
Excellent. Love to hear it.
Hit me with the math, and that's what I really needed.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, do you have any final thoughts about this? Anything you want to...
I don't think so. I don't know. I kind of want this card to just come out so I can actually build decks with it.
Yeah.
Maybe in King's Court. I don't know. Maybe in King's Court. I don't know why I would be there, but maybe.
Like, we have confirmation on Shield Bear. It's coming July 14th.
Yeah, we do know when that card's coming out.
Dude, you know what would be the most outrageous? Is if we get Boral End Dragon before we get Zenith.
Yeah. I don't even...
We're just sitting here with the DDD Requiem guy that no one really asked for, and then Boral End, which is actually going to be Dragon Link 2.0. Yeah. If LP gets banned and then Boral End gets released, do you think Dragon Link goes net stronger or weaker?
Probably weaker. I think I don't think it gets stronger, but it's definitely playable.
Yeah,
like it's definitely playable. Even if LB gets banned, Dragon is still like kind of playable. But this card is just so outrageous.
Only kind of playable.
I mean, it's still very playable. It's still pretty good. It's still obviously it's a lot weaker without LP, but it's still very good.
Yeah. Is it still tier 1 without LP?
Probably. It depends on how good Drytron is, I think.
That's true, yeah.
And whatever factors, like if ban Winda for something dumb. I mean, well, I don't want to get into that, but they could very easily just hit that engine too, and then here we are, like ban Schism or ban Winda or ban Servant. Ooh, gross.
Servant to 1 would be
anything.
Servant and Meltdown to 1. That'd be neat.
Yes.
Well, what were you gonna say about Winda though? I'm curious.
Oh no, I mean it's whatever. Like I think it's so pointless to speculate. Like ban list because we're always wrong.
Yeah.
No matter what we think, we are wrong. So I've just found it after years and years and years of trying to figure out what they might or should do. I've just learned they will never do what I think they're gonna do.
Yeah. Well,
because every time I go, wow, they should do this, they don't. And then I think, well, they should do this, but they won't do it, they do it. And I just go, I don't know what's going on anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
That's why I always like to ask,
yeah.
what would you like to see? So, like, what would you like to see about Winda?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably one of those cards that, like, we could do without. I think it's, like, pretty unfun to play with and against.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not I don't think it's unbeatable, but I think it's like it's annoying, you know.
Yeah,
and I know that's like it's just something that like, you know, we've dealt with for a long time.
Yeah.
And I would be okay. It's a card I feel it's kind of like Masterpiece and Colossus. It's just like, well, those cards weren't unbeatable.
Yeah.
Like those decks didn't win every single tournament, but like they warp how you build your deck, and every so often we have to get rid of those cards.
For sure.
Oh, and I've timed up due to inactivity, so I think that's a good place to call it.
Yeah, I'd agree. Well, thank you very much for doing this with me. This is a lot of fun, and yeah, I'll see you next month when we're commentating the top 8 matches for the Crystal Master Tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Have a good night, brother.
Yes. Yeah. See ya.